So let's look at how these combine, these gaps, these differences, in just a couple areas that have emerged as challenges for Western businesses in China. Let's look first at management. And this was one of my biggest difficulties when I worked in China. I found that my empowered, relatively egalitarian American management approach did not work nearly as well. And so I was faced with the task of having to probably be more directive, but at the same time trying to train my employees to work in a more empowered way, virtually with their global colleagues working in an American bank that expected that type of behavior. So management is strongly impacted by some of the gaps we've seen in hierarchy, in individualism, in relationships, and in motivation. So some of the things to think about, some strategies for success that come out of this, recognizing there is a traditional benevolent dictatorship model. And we saw it in Confucianism. The boss takes care of you, I owe loyalty to the boss. You win respect and loyalty by mentoring employees. It's the other side of that synergistic Confucian equation, which means that I take care of you, and I mentor you, I teach you, which resonates quite strongly in the workplace in China. Much more detailed job descriptions, tasking, a much more directive management model is probably the expectation given the combination of these value gaps. Some other strategies for success, really paying attention to your own credibility and status. If people grow up with a very strong hierarchy lens, make sure that you are seen as being appropriate in the hierarchy for what you are doing. This reflects a number of things. Title, for example. And many companies have had to change titles of someone who might just be a manager in the U.S. to become manager China market, manager China market certain product, to give them a title that lets them connect with higher level people and get things done in China, where so much of decision making is at the top of organizations. Status comes through in a number of other things other than title. How long have you been with the company? What have you done? What education background do you have in a culture that has focused on education for several thousand years as a way to move up in society? So really paying attention to how people see you through this hierarchy lens. And title consciousness comes through just in recognition and retention. Many companies have found that they've needed to change grades and titles to have many, many more so they could promote people in a much faster way, even though the gradations were much smaller than they would be in the West. This really reflects the status and achievement orientation. People feel they are moving ahead, they're getting a new title, they're moving up in the organization. Meetings came up as a challenge here for you in the poll. Much more often leader-directed, again with the hierarchy focus and expectations of a leader, but again because it is much more a group culture where individual expression is not patterned or reinforced in the same way, especially in the school system. Brainstorming meetings, open meetings are often much less the rule in China. Leaders take a much more hands-on role, usually. And just checking in frequently in the process. This is an impact of time and a more fluid time concept in China. People take things as they come up, even if they've agreed on a deadline. Many times I've found in my personal experience that would not be communicated. So checking in frequently, understanding how priorities are changing in this more fluid time matrix, often very important in the management process. Marketing, another area where you can begin to do gap analysis and understand some strategies for success. Marketing is influenced by differences in relationship. Again, by the fact that China is more of a group culture. Communication differences, and again, hierarchy differences. To market effectively, you have to have a really strong mix of the personal and business. I always said I could go out for a business dinner every night in China if I wanted to. And it usually is the case if you're operating there. Strong focus on enhancing, maintaining personal relationships at the dining table, karaoke, other forms of socialization. Personal is important, and so you're going to be asked a lot of questions about your age, your family, your background. Important to think about that and really come up with what could be your story. It can add to your credibility. Oh, my education is this, I grew up here, I spent this much time with a company doing this. And it also gives a sense of who you are as a person, your family, your hobbies, a whole range of things. But anticipate initial low trust, as we saw in that graphic model of in and out group. You've got to get over a fairly formidable barrier if you're marketing. You've got to move into the in group. So introductions are important. Your credibility is important in building that. Face-to-face contact, getting information, checking in, extremely important. Don't expect the customer to come up with their problems. Often that comes up just by checking in. And the concept of dropping in on a customer in China is still a pretty strong one and done fairly often. Dropping in just for a chat. It's not motivated by a problem, but you're often surprised how often it does turn up problems that might not have been articulated until they were at a crisis point. Certainly you're driving towards a contract, but expect ongoing negotiation as we've talked about before. And price will obviously be very important, but relationship is also important, and there is going to be a lot of haggling. China has a strong haggling tradition, so padding your price, probably in a higher way than you would in the West. Strategizing concessions, things you could give away, very important. And striving really for win-win outcomes so everyone can retain face, important strategies for success in marketing. And lastly, communication, which is a very, very different and difficult area. And I see that 50% of you indicated that it is a significant challenge. It is strongly influenced by the indirectness of the culture and face, by the group and the fact the individual and self-expression is often sublimated to the group, by hierarchy in terms of who can speak, who's authorized to speak, formality norms, and also risk assessment, differences in internal versus external control, as we've talked about. So firstly, just anticipate indirectness and ambiguity. Really strong need to practice active listening, reading between the lines as you seek to decipher this ambiguity and indirectness. Yes, no questioning is extremely difficult. If you rarely get a direct no, and yes can mean I hear you, not necessarily I agree, you almost always have to use open-ended questions or information questions if you want to really get the answer that you are looking for. Writing, graphics, very important to supplement verbal. If verbal is indirect, often concreteness can be added by writing or graphics, by background written information also. The public versus private persona, strong recognition of this phenomenon we've already talked about. Who's speaking? I always ask myself. And are they changing what they're saying because of the group or the situation they're in? If they are, I often try to get the person one-on-one if I know them and have a conversation. And often if you change the scene or the situation, you get very different information as you access that private person. Brainstorming, expecting everyone to throw their ideas out on a table in a room, in my own experience, has proven very difficult in China and is often less useful. People are reluctant to make mistakes. They're not patterned by the school system to throw out ideas off the top of their head. Meetings are generally much more structured than the West. A script, formality, deep implications for the communication process. So understanding the protocol, the etiquette, the scripts that are expected in situations is really vitally important. And just something as simple as the offer-decline ritual, which you see in China all the time. You offer to do something for someone. You offer them a gift. They always decline it to be polite. But you have to know that that's not what they really mean, and you have to insist on them taking it. And sometimes this will go back and forth 2 or even 3 times. But you have to know the script and the role you play and not take them at their word. Criticism, controversial language, definitely to be avoided because of the implications of face. And often you would use an intermediary in a difficult situation where face is impacted. Ensure that you have the credibility and authority to say something and have people act on it. Again, imagining how you look through Chinese eyes with a very strong hierarchical lens. And because of the need for context, for background in the communication process, China being a more high-context communication culture, using models, using precedent, a lot of background information is often imperative if you're going to assist in change, if you're going to get people to agree, if you are going to get people to buy in. So just some strategies for success in 3 of the areas I've seen as the biggest challenges in China.